disclaimer at the start of the video, this meta talk was done for Uproar Legion. So if you're watching this being a part of another team, or just a player not associated with Legion or Uproar, I'm sorry if I don't cover some in-depth things that you or your team could really benefit from, but this one is specifically done for them. If you're interested in how this comp should be played for you, or how you could improve with this team comp, you can always reach out to me through different mediums. They should be linked elsewhere. But starting us off, on today's meta talk, we are going over no other comp than the good old, the infamous Double Bubble. Double Bubble, as we know, is a sort of dive team composition that consists of both dive and brawl characters, so it's not always super obvious what should be happening. At times you can think, okay, we need to dive, okay, we need to brawl, okay, we need to poke. That's why this should hopefully be a little bit of a clarification. We of course know some of the other team composition and how they should be played more or less. We have the relatively standard, in my opinion, the 4-2 team comp, goats, and we have poke. The 4-2 team comp. You have 2 people being the ball and the tracer in the front line, while we have 4 people in the back line trying to sustain any attack, and we're trying to get a pincer in. Relatively straightforward. Goats. Your 3 tanks, you have 3 supports, you have very high damage, very high sustain, very high speed, but very little range damage. So you need to run down your opponents, try to close down the distance, and then try to win the fight as quickly as possible. Relatively straightforward. There isn't necessarily anything that needs to happen in a specific order. Same thing sort of with poke. Poke. You're sort of letting your DPS carry while the tanks and support try to sustain for as long as possible. Double shield tank, infamously, very hard to break unless you have something like a bastion to constantly pelt the barriers. And then of course we have hybrid poke, which in the last meta talk that I covered, I went over more in detail how this team comp should be played, but very shortly, it's a combination of all the 3 other competitions we had. It's a combination of all these 3, so it sort of still applies, but there isn't really any fight plan with this team composition. You're kind of just sending your backline to a rotation, and you're waiting for the pincer to happen while your backline sustains. So it's sort of like a 4-2. It's sort of like a poke with the Zen. It's sort of like goats where you have a Brig and Zarya that are trying to sustain the backline. That makes sense. And of course, how can we forget one of the more infamous, or I should say famous team compositions, Brawl, which you see a lot on maps like King's Row. Specifically, you quite often see the Zarya Brawl variation or the Diva Brawl variation. And with this kind of team composition, Zarya gets value over time because Zarya gets energy, and so does Ana. Ana can charge her nano boost relatively quickly, trying to carry the fight that way. And this team benefits from catching the enemy, so you like medium long fights. But none of this has to do with Double Bubble necessarily. Double Bubble is a dive composition. What you're trying to accomplish, or well, it's a dive composition, and Double Bubble specifically is a variation of dive where you want to catch the enemy while you have the resources. If a Double Bubble just dives, the first fight that happens, they're gonna be on a severe disadvantage. So you want to have some kind of advantage before you go. So this definition of dive doesn't necessarily apply. That slow setup but fast engages with a purpose. It should be forcing ults, cooldowns, or looking for fast kills. You can't really look to force ult, you can't really look to force cooldowns, and you can't really look for fast kills with Double Bubble. It is a slow team composition until you pull the trigger and you all in them and you try to win the fight very quickly. And well, there's a few variations of dive some of the more famous ones. A famous one that was really popular was Full Dive, where a win condition was you nano the Genji, and the Genji just goes in and kills everything. And then when you don't have that win condition, you're just diving the enemy team with your whole team, except the Ana, of course, who's relatively immobile, and you try to kill the enemy backline before the enemy can kill your backline fast enough. And usually trading your Ana in exchange for killing 2 to 3 people in the enemy's backline for full dive is a worthy trade. Then a relatively new comp that has come out is Rush. It's sort of like Goats, where you're kind of just running at the opponents, but you do run it with dive tanks, because dive tanks are really good at controlling space, contrary to what some people may think. They have a lot of mobility in their kit, so they can very quickly close the distance, and not having to run an Ana, you can opt in to run a Moira who can shift in, get in really close, and there is no backline for the enemy to kill or that you have to trade for. You just dive the enemy as your full team and you try to kill them really fast. Well, Double Bubble is neither of these things. Double Bubble is a relatively slow kind of team composition, and if you just look at Double Bubble by itself, you have a very high mobile main tank that wants to jump in, wants to create a lot of value, favors from a very short fight. Well, we have the opposite in Zarya here. Zarya doesn't really like a really fast fight. Zarya likes a fight that lasts for quite a bit, where she can get a bit of energy, when she has time to trade some bubbles and find some value with her bubbles, and of course in the end, when she gets a lot of charge, try to carry the fight through that. Like, Zarya feels like she's a little bit out of place. Well, as I've mentioned before, this is where the sort of hybrid part comes in. Double Bubble is a hybrid dive, you could call it. It doesn't really dive the same way that some people may think, and as the text under suggests, a combination of some of the comps above. And in this case, like it's highlighted, it's a poke dive, you could say, or it's a sustain dive, you could call it. And in Double Bubble, the hybrid part or the sustain dive part comes in because of some of the parties. So it's primarily the Zarya and the Ana who make sure that this comp operates like it should. And with Double Bubble, similarly to how some other team comps, it has like a win condition, right? You benefit from shorter trades because of the monkey. You go in quick, you get out quick, you don't want the fight or the engagement that you take lasting too long. So with this team comp, you'll quite often take so-called soft dives, where you dive in, not necessarily to just win the fight, but dive in to gain some kind of resource. If you can dive them, and your monkey gets bubbled, you get a bunch of energy on your monkey, or on your Zarya, I mean. You get a bunch of ult charge on your Ana, you can trade it for cooldowns on the enemy. Maybe you forced the Baptiste's lamp on the enemy team, or maybe you forced the Sigma to use his rock or shift. That's huge value. So, usually how it goes is, monkey engages, then the Zarya keeps the monkey alive, because one of the things that monkey really struggles with is, if he gets stunned, he can't really get out. Or if he gets stunned, he can sometimes be bursted very quickly. That's why Zarya is there, to make sure to keep the monkey alive. But Zarya can't do that alone. And who is gonna keep Zarya alive while Zarya is walking up to protect the monkey and control the space behind them? Well, that's the Ana's job. Ana has very long range healing, so she can stand quite a bit back and still provide all the necessary healing for the monkey and for the Zarya to survive, keeping the frontline alive. But what if during all of this happening, the Ana gets pressured by the enemy Tracer or Echo or some other very high speed pressure? Well, that's where Brig comes in. Brig is there to keep the backline alive, and with this team comp, the only real backline is Brig keeps herself alive and she keeps the Ana alive, while the DPS go with the tanks and try to go off of engages. So with this team comp, like I said, there's a little bit of a like pre-fight checklist that you have to complete. It's like a mini quest before you actually hard engage and go to win the fight. And this pre-fight checklist consists of Zarya getting high charge. And Zarya getting high charge can be 40%, 60%, 80%, as long as it's more than 40 or around 60, it's a good amount of charge usually to have. Because you're going to more than likely bubble yourself, and that's going to shoot up to 100 really quickly. And something else that's very important before you actually hard engage onto them, or hard dive as it's called, your Ana has to have nano boost or be very close, like 90 to 100%, so that she can basically hit her heal once or twice, and she's gonna have it. It's very important for it to work, but there's of course some other things that can be important for the execution to work, but they aren't so-called mandatory. And that's what we call the optional pre-fight checklist, which you don't have to have it, but if you do have it, it's better. It increases your win percentage in the fight that you take. It's Monkey is close to or has primal, and usually when Monkey has jumped in a few times, he's gonna have quite a lot of percentage to primal, like 60, 80. So by the time he actually jumps in later, he's gonna get primal when he needs it in this upcoming full dive fight. And if Tracer has her sticky, Echo has her ult. Sometimes you need it, but usually you don't want to waste high prio ults like Echo ult. That's why Tracer sticky ults are on a very low cooldown by default. You can't just use in this so-called just hard dive that comes in later instead of the shorter soft trades that you take. So how does the fight plan actually look like in that case? Well, the fight plan consists of the Monkey soft dives the enemy 2 to 3 times until the checklist has been completed. So, just to define soft dives again, the Monkey jumps in, not to get kills, not to win the fight outright, but to get value, so that on the dives afterwards, they have a higher win percentage, right? So Monkey jumps in a few times. If Zarya bubbles the Monkey during the right time when Monkey calls for it, Zarya is gonna get a lot of energy. And if Monkey takes the correct amount of damage, he won't die for it, but Ana will be able to heal the Monkey and basically get her nano boost. That's why I said 2 to 3. Sometimes you can complete this in one soft dive. Doesn't happen too often. That's why it's usually 2 to 3. This is gonna take about a minute, usually. Maybe a little bit more. Once the checklist has been completed, Monkey hard dives, meaning he all-ins the enemy, going in to actually just kill them and try to end the fight as fast as possible. Very similarly to how normal dive works, you're diving in to try to kill the targets and burst them as fast as possible. But what is different now is that you have nano boost, or your Monkey is nano boosted, which deals a lot of damage, and especially if Monkey is cleaving several targets, it's almost impossible for the enemy to survive it if the Monkey does the correct amount of damage. And if you guys played this properly or did this properly and only took a minute, the enemies shouldn't have too many ults now. You should be going in with basically as few resources as you can, because the enemy team doesn't have many either. So you walk up with nano, you try to burst the enemy backline, while your DPS follow in, trying to help you burst. Like maybe the Monkey bursts their Sigma to half health. Well, then the Echo comes in and cleans it up. Maybe you get the Ana to 1 HP as Monkey, but you can't finish it. That's where Tracer comes in and tries to kill it. But it's very important that the Zarya now, with high charge, starts following in. Because if everyone on the enemy team just turns on the Monkey, it's relatively easy to burst them. Even though they're nano boosted, Monkey doesn't have that much effective HP. If they have primal, yes, they can sustain, but they need the Zarya to walk up and for the Zarya to provide that pressure. It's like, hey, if you wanna go on my Monkey, you have to fight me too. And kind of like the text under suggests, the Zarya plus some of the DPS control and clean up the fight, but you might ask, how are we supposed to like accomplish this? How is this supposed to look? Because yeah, I might have explained it just now, but how is it actually supposed to look? How is it actually supposed to be executed? Well, that's what I'm hopefully gonna show in just a little bit. So, you may ask, how are you supposed to play something like this on attack? Well, a setup that you can do, or how I would do it if you knew what team copy you were playing into. Let's say you have this Orisa that's holding this area, right? Well, what you guys tried to do was take this rotation here with your entire team, which isn't necessarily great because you're going right into the crossfire of the Zarya and not the Zarya, the Orisa, the rest of our team. Usually, a default position, which most teams takes, is something like this. The Ana and Brig are standing far back, being able to peel for each other, keep each other alive. Zarya walks up with the monkey. All the DPS take their off angles, right? If they want to take this off angle here, or if one of them wants to take some other off angle, if one of them wants to do this, boost up, that's fine. Just what the DPS really need to remember is that the DPS more or less need to try to survive with as few resources as possible. You're trying to distract the enemy during some of these first fights. You're not necessarily going to just all in them, go in melee range and try to one clip the Orisa. That's not gonna happen. So the first fight usually goes something like this. Monkey jumps the enemy, or quite often if it's possible the monkey just walks up to the enemy. In this case it's not possible, so you'd have to jump. So if the Orisa is setting up here, the monkey jumps onto them, maybe uses this for cover a little bit, gets a bubble from Zarya, so he can stand forward, and he walks out with his own bubble, while being healed from the Ana. Right? And it's the same thing if the enemy is set up somewhere else. They're set up in here, well now the monkey can kind of just walk up and do the same thing, right? You're taking this short trade, and while the monkey is distracting the enemy team, the DPS are getting their damage in, and the Ana is healing the monkey, Zarya giving the bubble, right? So you're quite often going to see this sort of line happening here, right? Where it's monkey in front, Zarya in the middle, controlling the space behind the monkey, and then the supports behind them still, while the DPS are doing their own thing. You will see it quite often wherever or however you set up, right? So let's now say they're set up on this high ground instead. All the DPS might not walk up here, they might take this rotation instead, right? It doesn't necessarily matter what rotation the DPS take, as long as they get the damage in. The Zarya can now walk up through here, maybe, or through here, while the monkey jumps to the high ground, and the Ana keeps LOS of the monkey. One of the most important things, right? So as Zarya, you don't want to be like this, babysitting the Ana, because that's what the Brig is for. Brig is gonna keep the Ana alive just fine, almost whoever dives her. If there's a monkey that dives the Ana is gonna live it. If there's two DPS diving the Ana, quite often, Ana is gonna live it if she has Sleep Dart and Anti-Nade, which quite often they do. So Zarya should be somewhere in the middle. So monkey jumps in. Monkey starts fighting them here, taking the soft dive, right? Soft dive. The first 2 to 3 fights, sometimes maybe less, sometimes a little bit more, should take something like a minute usually. And this line is created again, because everyone plays in the Ana's LOS. And when the monkey jumps in, the Zarya needs to walk up to capitalize on the space. Because if Zarya is playing all the way back here, she can't bubble them. Or even worse, if the Ana walks up to try to get a little bit better of an angle, now Ana is body blocking the bubble. And if the bubble is body blocked, and if it's an unlucky occurrence, it might just happen that the monkey dies. And now you have to wait 10 seconds for the monkey to come back out of spawn. Right? But okay, you say, you're easy. Okay, we did this. We soft dive, we got our pre-fight checklist, which you may remember. We got our nano boost, our Zarya has high charge. What next? Right? Well, now you commence the so-called hard dive. For For some reason I can't move that echo entity. Okay, there we go. The monkey jumps, gets nano boost, and fully takes this fight against the enemy. He's going for the kill, right? And while this is happening, Zarya has a very high charge, so she can beam people, even up onto the high ground, and slowly walk up, right? So while Monkey is slowly murdering the enemy team, together with the DPS, because a hard drive has been called, for instance, right? The supports and the Zarya walk up. The Zarya creates space, or not the Zarya creates space, the Monkey creates space by jumping. Zarya controls this space, which lets the supports walk up. Right? And very often again, you see these lines happening where the Ana is in the back, Zarya is in the middle, Winston is in front. This like 1, 2, 3 line-ish. And if you do this properly, the enemy team won't have any ults because it's only 1 minute in. You go in fast because you have a dive, right? And with these 3 people and Monkey being nanoed, Zarya having a lot of energy, and if Ana especially hits an anti-nade, you can just win this fight purely by using nano boost, which gives you a lot of snowballing potential onto second point. Right? But okay, but how do we do this on second point then? Well, let's say kind of like it actually happened. Orisa was set up here, if I'm not completely messing it up. We were set up something like this, or I guess you guys were. And we're looking to go in, right? So what can you do? Well, usually you don't want these 3 people to stack that often, because we need the Zarya to control space far forward. Quite often you want more something like this happen before the soft dives come in, right? Zarya is playing near the Monkey, but the most important thing is that everyone is playing in the Ana's LOS. Ana's LOS, something like this. Echo can kind of do their own thing, they're quite often not gonna die. Tracer can do their own thing, they're quite often not gonna die. And the Brig is here to keep the Ana alive. The supports don't need more peeling than that. So if you're a Tracer, if you're a Monkey, if you're a Zarya, if you are an Echo, basically if you're not Brig and you're not Ana, you don't need to participate in what happens in the backline unless the backline is getting fully dove by the entirety of the enemy team. Right? So, how does a fight actually happen then? How does it look like? Well, quite often, Monkey, let's say he walks in, he takes a path where he takes as little damage as possible, usually something like this, right? You're hugging this, you walk up to something like this, because this is a very safe spot. There is a wall here, so you cannot take damage from the enemy unless someone is standing in this window, and you can get healing from your Ana. It's quite a safe spot, right? So you stand in this corner quite often, with your Zarya also walking in, standing somewhere like here. You jump in as the Monkey onto them while the DPS go in at the same time. Right? When the Monkey goes in, everyone else also goes in, sort of, right? The Zarya starts walking up. The Ana, trying to keep the LOS, creates this line again, right? Very important that the Ana has this sight line on everyone. So you can't give up the high ground because it's very easy to regain it, right? It's no big deal. And if you're saying, okay, I'm as Ana just gonna get dove if this happens, well, that's what we have Miss Brig for. She's gonna keep you safe, right? So a soft dive happens. Now Monkey walks out, right? And what allows the Monkey to walk out is the fact that the Zarya walked up. So Zarya got a bit of energy, and now Monkey can fall back and get back to his corner while they're falling back, right? So usually it's gonna look something like this. Okay, so we take this dive, then at the same time as Zarya falls back to this corner, Monkey falls back to this corner, right? Maybe you get 50% or maybe 60% on your nano, right? You do the same thing again. Monkey jumps in, tries to move them, tries to find cooldowns, resources, whatever, right? Ana keeps this LOS, Zarya walks up, the DPS try to get damage in. And because Zarya is controlling this space on point now, right? Because she is starting to get a bunch of energy from bubbling the monkey all the time, and potentially using her own bubble on herself, she's getting a lot of charge. So people can't go down to the point to contest her anymore, especially if the DPS are there, right? You do this a second time, for instance, right? Now, the monkey goes out, the Zarya goes out, support may be set up on the high ground again. Like, you don't necessarily really need to set up on this high ground. It's just a good default position so you don't get spammed up, because you can take cover behind the pillar, right? The Tracer goes back. Maybe she takes the Mega that's located here. Maybe the Echo goes back, takes the Mega that's located here, and goes over again, right? Now, you have Nano, let's say. Let's say you have like 100% charge on the Zarya, and now because you're snowballing from the first point, you might have like some ults up now. You might have Tracer Sticky Bomb, you might have the Echo ult, you might have Rally, right? So this fight is gonna play out a little bit differently. So Monkey is starting in his default position again, right? Jumps, and while he's jumping, gets the nano boost, and we start walking up to brawl on point, right? So the positioning starts to look something like this. Zarya is going to control point together with Brig, Ana is going to stand behind cover, something like this, still creating this line. Remember? And if Ana gets stove, there's two very bulky people who can keep the Ana alive. Brig can bash anyone away, give the Ana packs, Zarya can potentially just burst down anyone who dives them, and the DPS are going around killing stuff, right? And if the monkey is nano, that's more than enough damage a lot of the time just to kill things, right? But what happens if it doesn't quite go as planned, right? What happens if, well, let's say something really bad happens, like it doesn't really work out. So monkey jumps in, the monkey kind of zaps, does his own thing, but Zarya forgot to rotate up, or the Ana forgot to keep the monkey in her LOS, right? Or maybe the monkey is just very reckless and decided to jump directly into a Reaper, right? Or maybe didn't get backup from the rest of the team. Well, monkey maybe dies then, has to go back to spawn. Well, we just get out, right? There's no reason for us to be this far up, right? We don't need to keep these default positions, because the enemy team is just gonna poke us out, because we don't have a monkey who creates space for us, right? So we can give up this high ground. We can let the Zarya rotate out, we can let the Tracer and Echo get out, right? The monkey comes back, monkey starts making this rotation here, while monkey makes this rotation, Zarya makes this rotation, and while that happens, the supports may be set up on the Tracer's high ground again, right? But the supports don't necessarily need to set up on this high ground. You're avoiding this crossfire here, because it's very hard to get hit on this high ground. So it's a fine default position, but you need to keep the monkey in your LOS as Ana. It's one of the more important things. And Zarya needs to stand in the bubble range of the monkey, which means you can't be here. You absolutely cannot. You need to walk up. And if all of this goes properly, you just retry this until it works, right? You just do the checklist. We have nano, yes. We have charge on our Zarya, yes. We go in. And then any more ults after that, right? If, let's say, monkey has his primal, very good. The monkey is gonna survive for longer. He can battle the people on the high ground for longer. Tracer has sticky, well, that can just be an extra pick. Why not, right? Echo has her ult, very good. She can go in, she can copy someone, and then you have even more damage, or maybe a really high prio ult. Grav is self-explanatory. You throw the Grav, it's a lot easier for the monkey to go in and kill stuff on if you have Pulse Bomb or any other ults. Very good. And if the Brig has Rally, when this final phase comes in, where you're kind of brawling on point, when something like this happens, then you're going to provide armor to everyone fighting, which makes you even more durable. Okay, you're easy. Fine and good. But how the hell do you execute a comp like this on defense where inherently you can't just go in, go out, you can't just soft reset like this. You can't take these soft dives because if you soft dive, the enemy team are just gonna go on point, they're gonna cap it and you lose. Right? Fair point. But that's where we abuse some of the mechanics on defense, right? When you are the defending team, you no longer actually have to dive as much with Winston. It's actually easier to pull this team comp off on defense, I'd argue. So, let's say the enemy team wants to take a rotation like this. Right? They want to go to point. Well, if they're taking a rotation like that, or by default Monkey sets up in a position like this around this corner or here, right? If they are gonna walk up, they're gonna get zapped by Winston from the side, right? It's very important that Monkey isn't standing in the open, right in front of them, like this, so he gets poked out before the fight starts, but he sits in a position like this, so if they walk past, they're going to get zapped by the Monkey from the side, right? And while this is happening, the Monkey is still in LOS of the Zarya, LOS of the Ana, and LOS of the Brig. So can get a lot of healing, and I said LOS a lot, but basically it just means for line of sight, right? So basically you can see them, you can click your abilities on them, more or less. Right. So the enemy team has two options at this point, right? They can keep taking this rotation, trying to ignore the Monkey, which is a bad option, because, well, Monkey just gonna zap you the entire way, while the Zarya is just gonna, like, walk back slowly. And the Ana can even get, like, a pretty big anti-nade potentially here, if they walk up, while the DPS pelt them, right? In general, not a great option. You're being surrounded by every side. The Ana has this high ground over here, she can very quickly anti-nade you, and you are in the shit. It's pretty annoying. So most teams will try to burst this Monkey, right? But because Monkey didn't need to use Leap to be in melee range of the enemy team, he can now use his Leap defensively, right? So the enemy team turn on the Monkey, well, he gets a bubble from the Zarya, he gets 40 charge, Ana gets a bunch of ult charge. Well, Monkey feels too threatened, Monkey might die, Monkey can very easily leap to the point, still being in line of sight, or LOS, of the Ana and everyone else, can jump back to this high ground if the Monkey can hit the jump, or just jump away in general, right? Even onto this high ground can work if the enemy team can't catch you there. Right, so you got a bit of ult charge. You got some ult charge if you're Monkey, you got some charge, like gun charge on Zarya, and you got some nano charge on Ana, right? So you did this once, very early, right? Okay, it makes sense. But you lose some positioning for it. The Zarya starts walking up. Not the Zarya, the Orisa starts walking up. And all of a sudden, it kind of feels like you are in the shit. They have gotten all this positioning, and now all of a sudden they're walking up the point. Right? Well, now you can do the exact same thing. If the Monkey took the proper time to jump out, Monkey is gonna be on point, on this high ground, can make this rotation to pop in under here. Again, getting a side angle, not standing directly in front of them, right? Something like this, or something like this. Now they have to walk into point, into the Monkey, or they can just ignore the Monkey, not trying to burst them, walk into point. Again, terrible option. You get surrounded from everywhere. Not necessarily the greatest option, right? And I did place Zarya up here initially, but Zarya should be somewhere down here because, you know, LOS of the Monkey, and you should be somewhere where you can deal the damage and back up the Monkey if needed. Right? So let's say you do this again. Well, now you can't. Usually, what would happen, or what most teams would do, is the Monkey, after he takes too much damage, would jump back to the high ground, get healed up, and by the time the Monkey actually gets healed up, he will have nano, right? So maybe they get one tick on point. I can't spell, but it's whatever. They get one tick on point. Well, Now the monkey has had time to heal up. He's basically gonna be very close to primal. Tracer and Echo are gonna be pretty close to their ult because they've been pelting the enemy, like just dealing the damage onto them for very long. And Zarya is gonna have a lot of charge. Well, kind of like before, Monkey gets nanoed and just jumps in, and instead of just soft diving like he did before, kind of buying time, you do the hard engage with nano. And if you played it properly, the enemy team wouldn't have gotten that much ult charge while you have your nano, more or less. And just you as Monkey jumping in with nano, while your Zarya starts walking up and beaming everything here, right? Like just having your beam just shoot at them, killing them, while the Tracer and Echo are getting some of these off angles, right? Shooting them from this side of your Tracer or from this side of your Tracer. And with Echo you have even more angles because you have a vertical movement, while the supports just sit on the high ground healing them. And when the hard dive comes in, if there's nothing that can pressure the Ana, quite often you'll also see the Brig come down and try to help the Zarya, keeping the Zarya alive instead. And you're still keeping this line of sight arrow like I was talking about before, right? Where it's Ana in the back, usually with Brig, in this case not. Zarya in the middle, Monkey up front. And quite often this is a lot easier to pull off on defense because the Monkey can use his leap defensively instead of offensively. And a lot of time, if the enemy team wants the pressure point, they have to go completely through the Monkey, giving the Zarya, I guess. Okay, that's not what should have happened, but I guess all my characters got deleted. But giving the Zarya a lot of charge, right? Giving the Ana a lot of ult charge, and if you get nano boost, and you get your Zarya charge, right? Zarya percent, I'll just call it because it's percent increased damage. You might just win the fight with that. And it's worth giving one tick for it, because now you can just snowball the entire fight because you won the initial fight. So I'm now going to give an example of how something like this is gonna look. This is Uproar pulling off a variation of this team comp. The only difference is you are running a McCree instead of the Tracer because you're trying to peel for the backline a little bit more, because the enemy team has shown that they are playing a very similar comp. So you want to, well, try to make sure the Monkey can't do what your Monkey is going to do, right? So you're going to see Arcan kind of going forward here, trying to take some of these traits, while Cynthia, being Connor here, getting a bubble onto the Monkey. It's a little bit hard to see, but a bubble comes in here. And while this is happening, right, you can see this arrow going on here. You don't often want to make a rotation as the supports, but sometimes you have to. And Hop on the Brig here, just making sure that the Ana doesn't get killed, right? You don't have to actually stand with the Ana for that to happen. So right, both the Monkeys do more or less the same thing. They try to accomplish the same goal. They're both trying to take these soft engages, trying to get charge for their respective Zaryas and get charge for their respective Anas, right? So now Arcan is more than likely going to do a very similar thing, right? He jumps up to the high ground, trying to pressure them out, taking the soft engage again. Unfortunately, Jamie was on low health, so wasn't able to heal the Monkey, and the Zarya, Cynthia, or Connor, was not in a position to bubble the Monkey. So there was a bit of a miscommunication here, and this rotation wasn't great either, right? You don't often want to make rotations like this because of this reason. As you quite often get caught in rooms like this, you can't peel for your Monkey. But even when that happens, right? You just hold this room now. You don't need to poke. You don't need to take a lot of advantage. You don't need to walk out. So we're just still holding this room. We're waiting for a Monkey to walk out, right? Brig is trying to do the same thing, trying to keep the Zarya charge alive by getting bubbled and walking out into the open. And you're just controlling. And their Monkey on the enemy team is not doing a great job. He's walking in, he got the bubble, he's trying to get charge for his Zarya, right? He is very close to his ult, and is very close to their ult, and Zarya Stainless is probably getting a lot of ult charge. But Stainless did pull off the barrier a little bit too early, and this is where the McCree comes in this team comp, right? McCree stunned the monkey out, monkey couldn't get out, and now it's a little bit of a disaster. Arkan jumps in, being Harry, gets the nano boost, which means we're doing a full-on engage now, right? Hop the Brig, Connor the Zarya walks up, capitalize on the space created while Sasha and Jamie stay on this high ground while the DPS go in and try to kill stuff on the point. So even when this comp doesn't quite go as you expect it to, it still somewhat works, right? Like, Connor should have ideally walked up a little bit more here and actually capitalized on the charge, not getting a lot of damage, which you can kind of see on the damage numbers here. Connor only deal 527 damage, while the enemy Zarya dealt almost double that. But that's not necessarily Connor's fault, it's just we also played this comp without having a full understanding of it. And so we're going to skip forward a little bit here. Tendency being the Echo in red with the Korean letters gets an initial pick, which doesn't happen too often, but it can happen. Right? Harry walks up, and instead of taking this lower pillar here, he takes this pillar instead. He gets bubbled, he jumps in, he tries to get some value, and as he is going in, Connor on Zarya also goes up together with Hop. Hop should have ideally not walked up, but because there's a McCree in the backline, it's fine, because the Ana is not gonna die to it, right? You see, they're diving into the backline, and now a whole lot of peeling is coming in all of a sudden. So the monkey even has to pop primal, but even then he just gets popped by the McCree. It's like you're playing more to peel for the backline, and into when an enemy team is mirroring you, it can be a good idea to run something like this. And Harry, together with Tendency in the backline, there's no Tracer this time, but it's still enough to just walk in and start clearing this high ground off and kill stuff, right? While Hop and Connor are controlling the point. And then again, Sasha is doing the Brig's job here, keeping the backline alive. And now that you do have control of point, it's so hard to try to walk into this very high charge Zarya. This Brig that just controlling, and Jamie kinda drops in here to try to stay in LOS. Is still gonna control the sightline and just keep everyone on his team very healthy, very alive. And even though respawns are coming back, I do believe this fight still goes over to Uproar, if I'm not mistaken. It does, and it's a cap with 4 minutes 16 seconds remaining. This is how you sort of pull this comp off on attack. Well, okay, but how does a team actually play this on defense then? So it's yet again Uproar playing this, but instead of Connor on the off tank, it's Mobilized on off tank now. So Mobilized should hopefully recall this somewhat, right? So the supports play on the high ground, Brig makes sure that Ana can't get dove, while Mobilized is playing on the low ground, bubbling the monkey right then, to try to keep charge. The bubble was a little bit mistimed, but that has to do with communication too, right? So they have to choose between focusing the monkey or just walking past the monkey. Either way, not great. Monkey getting a lot of charge, Ana getting a lot of ult charge too. Right. Sasha is playing soldier here instead of Tracer, but it's mostly just whatever you feel like you can get the value with, without dying. So Harry just keeping this corner here alive, while Jamie is still keeping them full health. If there's any threat that Harry is gonna die, he's going to jump back onto this high ground after Mobilized has already burned the bubble. Like here, because an enemy team is running not something very brawling, you can't actually move Harry from this position with the amount of peeling coming in from him. They can't actually walk up, but against a brawl, Harry would fall back a lot earlier. So the bubbles are still a little bit mistimed here, but it's whatever. The Tracer is trying to walk up, but Hop is not allowing it. Right, and now you're approaching Nano. So you're looking at your win conditions here, right? what are you trying to do? You're trying to get nano, you're trying to get high charge on your Zarya. Zarya gets a lot of high charge, you have nano, well, you take the fight. Harry gets nanoed, he goes in, starts pelting people. The enemy team sort of realizes this, falls back. We even force Trance in the backline. Mobilized is playing a little bit too far back in my opinion, but it's whatever. They're playing into a pharmacy, it can be hard. Right, and then because you can't kill backline, Harry does the right decision, jumps back to point, tries to find some more damage here, right? And just for using the nano, you can force the Trance. That's such a worth trade. And here, when the Tracer tries to come up and push Jamie and hop off, Tracer just gets bashed, gets booped off. And now, because Zen didn't have Trance, you can just use relatively few ults. You can just use Visor, you can just use Monkey ult, and you can just win the fight outright. And we've wasted 2 minutes with the enemy team more or less only taking 1 or 2 fights for us only using very limited ults. So if you just keep doing something like this, it's going to work out as long as the monkey doesn't get picked. It's very important that the monkey does not get picked on defense. But you want the monkey to be in melee range of the enemy team at least twice so that you get the nano and so that you get the charge, right? We're very close to nano again. We probably have a lot of charge and mobilized. So we only need to do 1 soft dive, if even that, to do this very same thing again. That monkey yet again controlling this, getting burned quite fast, gets pulse bombed, gets caught. Not great. We almost had nano. Bubble wasn't quite there for it. Bubble was a little bit too early. But that's just some of the things that can go wrong. That's why it's very important that the monkey can read the situation properly and know when to get out. And that the Zarya bubbles the monkey during the right time when they're taking damage and not just when they're peeking. At this time, I do believe it was Harry who called for the bubble, so it's sort of Harry's own fault. As Zarya, it's your responsibility to bubble the monkey at the right time, even if the monkey calls for it. If you feel like there's a better reason you're holding it for, then you tell the monkey and you do so.